Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks once again for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Dave Percy. I'll be hosting today's show. On the hazardous weather graphic, we've got high wind warnings out late tonight and through tomorrow here for the central eastern Alaska range. Storm coming northward, gradient will kick the winds up, looking for gusts as high as 70 miles an hour into tomorrow night. And then wind advisories there for the western part of the range up through there for Denali, and gusts in that area more like in the 40 to 50 mile an hour range. Taking another look here to the north, a little bit farther, this shaded areas here, all winter storm watches for anywhere from 6 to 8 inches of snow. This kicks in about, late tomorrow night in through Monday for these areas here. And again, snow, maybe some gusty winds. And of course, the snow is going to be heavy wet in some areas, but as much as 6 to 8 inches could fall. Here from the Yukon Flats all the way out into the Noatak Valley areas and then down toward Galena. Also a high wind warning out for tonight. Winds will continue to increase here for the St. Lawrence Island area and the Bering Strait coast, and could see gusts as high as 70 miles an hour later tonight and in through the day on Sunday. Moving on to the satellite imagery, seeing what's going on currently. See a system here pulling westward and weakening there along the Alaska Peninsula, leaving a lot of moisture, clouds, and some areas of rain and snow behind there across Bristol Bay and the peninsula. Back to Kodiak Island. A lot of clouds shifting up over southern Alaska throughout the day today. Higher clouds associated with this system pulling northward, moving or scooting north just off the coast there, the Panhandles, giving gusty winds and rain throughout that area. Some of the rain a little on the heavier side or something more than light, say around Yakutat, and then areas of that back along the North Gulf Coast of lighter precipitation here, increasing during the afternoon. Pretty good break shifting up over the interior there with clearing Fairbanks and the Tanana Valley back to the west, all the way to eastern Norton Sound, and then from the Brooks Range northward, especially out toward the Arctic coast and the western side here, low clouds, fog, or low clouds in areas of light snow, possibly some flurries. Winds much lighter today on the central and eastern Arctic coast than yesterday. Still a little gusty here on the west side, kicking up anywhere from 25 to maybe 35 miles an hour, a few higher gusts there, and then gusts around 40 or so here this afternoon. They're coming down across St. Lawrence Island. And again, those are expected to increase. Higher pressure out here over the central Aleutians into the Bering Sea, pulling some colder air southward into the eastern Aleutians from the Pribilofs, and that will continue into tonight. And this front pushing eastward, pretty good winds with that. Definitely storm force winds with Shimia seeing gusts of 65 miles an hour this afternoon with rain and snow through that area. And that's going to not really move too much. It's going to stall out there as this northerly flow kind of increases and will actually tend to push it back to the west or to the south or southwest. On the chart today, you can see that intense low center, 956 millibar associated with the front right through here. Rain and snow, and again, those strong winds in advance of that. Winds on the increase around AKwx this afternoon. Well, not really, actually. It will be tonight or this evening, those increase there at Samchitka Island there. Central Aleutians not too bad, maybe a couple of rain and snow showers. A little more moisture here along the Alaska Peninsula. Mostly rain for the peninsula with a mixture along or just to the north, and then colder air, snow showers for the Pribilof Islands, and some areas of flurries up through the west central interior today. But again, a pretty good break shifting northward ahead of this system coming up from the south, and then this moisture that's sliding up to the north there. So areas of snow here for the central Brooks Range. some areas of light snow, and again, windy conditions, western Arctic coast, and just flurries today with much lighter winds on the east side. Otherwise, this low coming up into the Gulf of Alaska, about 988 millibars there, and the front rotating right up into the southeast coast, so good gusty winds and rain, heaviest here on the north coast, beginning to increase along the North Gulf Coast as well, with some snow sliding on up into the southeast Copper River Basin area, mostly around the Wrangell Mountains. And we'll see for tonight that front weakens, kicks northward here, just a trough now, but should spread some moisture, be light snow into areas here of the eastern interior and the 40-mile country, and then that'll be mostly on the upslope areas of the Alaska Range, right through here back down toward Shelikof Strait and the Aleutian Range. Look for rain, Kodiak tonight, breezy conditions, wet and breezy or windy for the North Gulf Coast, with diminishing winds here for the Panhandle. Another trough actually coming up behind that, keeping a chance of showers in over the northern Panhandle, but improving down to the south over the southern southeast coast. Just a few lingering showers, mostly offshore. Out to the west, that front kind of hold up here, back over the western Aleutians, another system developing and moving off to the southeast there, and you can see increasing northeast flow over the Bering Sea, turns easterly, holding this back to the south. Look for snow showers to continue, but nothing too heavy or widespread over the Pribilof Islands. Mixture of conditions here for the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians. Again, pretty light. Winds not all that strong as well, but actually increasing here, coming up to warning values later tonight or tomorrow for the St. Lawrence Island area and the Bering Strait. Again, possible gust 70 miles an hour. Kind of a persistent light snow and fog pattern going along with that. Drier up there over the northwest interior, and still breezy, Kivalina out to Point Hope, Cape Lisburne. Pretty windy, 30 to 40 mile an hour winds up there in gusts, possibly a little bit higher. And then no change here, flurries and clouds for the north slope and the Arctic coast. And then taking a look at forecast for tomorrow, this trough continues to slide northward there, so an area of light snow will go along with it up toward the eastern Brooks Range and drying out behind. So pretty good day coming up for the Tanana Valley, eventually shifting up in toward Fort Yukon. Less activity on the Arctic coast, still some flurries, but nothing significant. And again, those strong winds and light snow and fog here through the Bering Strait to St. Lawrence Island. Some of that now coming southward with the push of cold air. Snow showers possibly reaching as far south as Nikolsky, Alaska, late in the day tomorrow. Otherwise, staying mixed here over the Alaska Peninsula. Big storm down here to the south, coming northward, increasing the winds and precipitation, sliding on up. Big area of rainfall here coming on to the southeast coast along the North Gulf Coast into the afternoon. This for about 3-4 p.m. tomorrow, or Sunday afternoon. Otherwise, to the north, break again over the Copper River Basin, just variably cloudy and dry. Persistent light precipitation along the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range. And again, Tanana Valley looking pretty good. And the front out west, again, really not making much of a move here with this northeast and easterly flow developing across the Bering Sea. Otherwise, some rain and snow as far east as looks like Atka. Forecast for Monday. System drives northward here. So look for some pretty gusty winds south central Alaska, especially along the Alaska Range. Mixture of rain and snow for the North Gulf Coast. Less wind and rain for the Panhandle, and snow and blowing snow there from the Bering Strait up along the Arctic coast. Lows for tonight, below zero here from the North Slope and Arctic coast. Otherwise, 30s southern Alaska, teens in the interior, and 40s, mild 40s here for the Panhandle. And for the highs tomorrow, mild mid to upper 40s for the southeast coast, 30s to near 40 in the south here, a shade above zero up along the Arctic coast. Then looking at lows for tomorrow night, Monday morning, 20s to lower 30s, southern Alaska, a low below zero on the Arctic coast, near 40 for the Panhandle, and 30s out west. Highs the next day, mid 40s here over south central Alaska, and 5 to 10 on the Arctic coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving into flying weather, IFR here, slipping over to the eastern part of the Panhandle and the border, all the way up across Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, along the North Gulf Coast and the Coast Range. Swath of VFR here north of the Alaska Range through the Tanana Valley all the way up to the northwest coast, including Kotzebue Sound, and then back down across Norton Sound to the Yukon Delta. Pretty widespread IFR, eastern north slope to the Arctic coast, as well as the Brooks Range. IFR with that frontal boundary out there to the west, pushing in toward Atka Island late in the day, otherwise pretty marginal across the Bering Sea. IFR up along the eastern slopes of the Aleutian and western Alaska Range. For tomorrow afternoon, you can see this area becomes more expansive and extends southward now to the Mulatto Hills. Still a little bit of VFR around Nome and possibly White Mountain in those areas. And then IFR also expanding westward to the central north slope with a lot of marginal VFR out here over the Bering Sea, but you lose the IFR out there in the west, and building IFR coming eastward and northward, closing in on Kodiak Island in the afternoon. And for Monday morning, IFR now up along the North Gulf Coast, the Coast Range, and probably up possibly to the east side of the Talkeetna Mountains there, and then back down the south coast of the Kenai Peninsula, northern Kodiak Island, and the southern Alaska Range, all the way including the Alaska Peninsula, whole southwest coast, Yukon, Kuskokwim Delta, and Nunivak Island up to the Bering Strait. Pretty well IFR'd in for the Monday morning period there, also the north slope with marginal VFR just about everywhere else. Areas of VFR though over the Tanana Valley, maybe the Kuskokwim Valley here with that southeast flow. And then moving on to Monday afternoon, same pattern here. Southern slopes of the central Alaska Range, eastern slopes of the east-western range here. That's where the lowest flying conditions will be. Still IFR up along the North Gulf Coast, not quite as extensive as it was. And then northern Panhandle looking for IFR, marginal all the way down to Dixon Entrance. Out west, marginal VFR. For passes, Anatuvik, marginal becoming IFR, some moisture lifts northward. Same pattern for Adigan as well, marginal deteriorating conditions into the afternoon. And for Lake Clark, IFR, eastern approach is both passes. Rainy, same thing, eastern approach, IFR, otherwise marginal. And for windy, I'd say VFR in the north side there, definitely into the Tanana Valley. Possibility of occasional marginal VFR, especially on the southern entrance. And Isabel, southern entrance, chance of some marginal VFR throughout the day, otherwise VFR. And Mentasta, probably going to be VFR on that north side with marginal VFR. And then for, let's see, Tanita, VFR, again, chance of some marginal VFR. Lowest conditions will be on that eastern entrance. And finally, Portage, same pattern as we've seen, IFR, marginal VFR, IFR, lowest conditions. That actually could be maybe low IFR in the eastern entrance. Chilcoot and White, IFR. Freezing levels 2,000 feet here over the southwest coast, and the northern Panhandle 2,000 slipping up to about 6,000 there, Queen Charlotte Islands. Icing up along the North Gulf Coast, areas of light to very isolated moderate above 5,000 feet. And another zone here, Bristol Bay to the Alaska Peninsula. This area lifting northward throughout the day. Again, closing in on the Brooks Range, mostly central and east side. Below about 2,000, and then above about 5,000 with that frontal boundary out west. Winds aloft, big trough here south. This is the next storm coming northward, actually. Pretty good jet here. 140 knots right up to the North Gulf Coast. Coming in across the Panhandle here with a regional on the west coast. 50 knots up along the Arctic coast. And taking a look at the 9,000-foot wind flow chart here, pretty strong coming in actually off the Gulf of Alaska with this storm coming northward. 40 to 50 knots off the southeast coast, up to 55 knots, and then increasing 40 to 50 knots in across Prince William Sound and the Kenai Peninsula here to the Alaska Range, 35 for Kodiak, and then a band of pretty strong winds blowing right up across the Alaska Range, 25 knots up there toward Arctic Village. 3,000 feet, same pattern here. System coming northward, pretty strong winds with that, 30 to 40 knots, all increasing throughout the afternoon along the Panhandle and even into across the south central Alaska, 40 to 55 knots here across the Alaska Range, 35 knots up over the Yukon Flats. And as far as turbulence goes, occasional moderate chop, central western Aleutians, big area moderate chop over the interior to the Panhandle.
NOAA's national marine sanctuaries protect areas of national significance for their exceptional natural beauty and resources. Research and monitoring expeditions provide scientists with valuable knowledge about the biodiversity and ecological integrity of these fragile underwater systems. The knowledge does not come easy. Their mission is challenging and sometimes dangerous, but these risks pale in comparison to the wealth of information that awaits them. This is Expedition Sanctuary Quest. Preparing a research vessel to go to sea is a huge undertaking. Over the course of one day, the empty ship transforms into a high-tech research platform. Tons of equipment, provisions, and supplies have to be loaded and stowed. The crew must double-check every last detail. Once at sea, the ship must be entirely self-sufficient. To keep everything running smoothly, the crew charts a cruise plan to coincide with the schedule of research. The goal of this expedition is to assess the health of offshore and nearshore marine ecosystems. The NOAA ship MacArthur will spend 2 months at sea, focusing on all the national marine sanctuaries along the West Coast, from Southern California to Northern Washington. Research takes place around the clock, and as night closes over the sanctuary, a team of special map makers deploy their side-scan sonar. The sonar will provide acoustic information to make detailed maps of the ocean floor. As one set of scientists are finishing up the night shift, another is being called to start their day. Wake-up calls come early, usually before the sun is up. By dawn, Chief Scientist Sarah Fangman is on the bridge, checking the plans for the deployment of the remotely operated vehicle.
Our weather has turned a little bit, and so we're going to have to move to a more protected area where we can work. Well, as long as we're heading in this direction, because the weather is forcing us that way, we'd like to stop.
Once calmer waters are found, the science continues. The remotely operated vehicle crew prepares their machine for its dive. The ROV allows the scientists to penetrate the unexplored depths, which account for 90% of the ocean. There is no idle time. While the ROV is being prepared, another group of scientists takes seawater and surface plankton samples. As the samples are collected, they go straight to the onboard lab, where they are processed and analyzed.
The ROV can stay down many hours, whereas divers are limited with supplied air, and we can rotate shifts and go 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
The cameras on the ROV are the scientists' eyes into the ocean. These cameras will confirm what the scientists have found through the side-scan sonar mapping. The ROV also allows scientists the opportunity to do species counts and more detailed habitat classification.
Yes, look at the anemones and the corals, cup corals.
Oh yeah.
That is
excellent.
gorgeous.
Excellent. Habitat's changed dramatically.
Yeah.
Oh,
did you see
nice
it just
one.
caught
Right.
that?
Yeah.
Did you see that?
Oh yeah.
A research ship can be a dangerous place with hazards all around. Everyone must be alert to these and know how to deal with emergencies. Fire and evacuation drills are performed without warning at any time of the day or night. As the science work goes on, the ship's crew also works around the clock. Engineers keep the engines operating properly, while the deck officers constantly monitor the ship's location. The deck crew operates all the machinery needed to perform the research, and the galley crew has to be sure all 40 people on board get fed. As night falls again, another shift of scientists begin their work in trawling for plankton.
Half moon out there, so there's quite a bit of light, which will affect how fast and how high these critters come up in the water column.
Okay, watch the slack there, folks.
Okay, got her. Let her go.
One more step in measuring productivity of an area.
Juvenile deposits, krill, squid, copepods.
After a long, wet night, dawn finally comes. The ship begins a transit to the next area for work. As miles of ocean slide beneath the hull, the observations and data collecting continue. Seabird and marine mammal observers are out working. Bird and whale counts help determine the health of a given area. For 2 months, this grueling schedule of day and night scientific work continues, searching for the understanding that will provide solutions to better manage resources within our national marine sanctuary.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis for Saturday, continuing to slowly advance out to the west here. As you can see, getting close to Nunivak Island, Norton Sound iced over, and the same thing going on up here across the Chukchi Sea, gradually closing in, but still open on back toward Wrangell Island. And a little bit here in Bristol Bay, not too much, but there is some, as well as northern Cook Inlet. And for the marine forecast for tomorrow, full gales here coming into the southeast coast here. East, 45 knots, south, 40 knots north, and 20 to 25 over the inside waters here, southeast for Clarence Strait to south for northern Lynn Canal. Outlook for Monday, southeast 30 knots from Clarence Strait all the way up into Lynn Canal and Stevens Passage. In those areas, small craft advisory, south winds 25 with 18 to 20 foot seas on the south coast. And then gales up here on the extreme north coast, 35 out of the southeast, even stronger just to the west, with seas up to over 20 feet through this area. And moving on to Prince William Sound. For tomorrow, east winds increasing to 30 knots, seas building to 6 feet. Full gales here on the North Gulf Coast, 40 knots out of the east, right across the Barren Islands, taking a turn to the northwest there, or a southeast wind. 35 knot gales for Kachemak Bay, 30 knots here south of the Forelands and Cook Inlet, northeast 20 north of the Forelands. And then for the Monday outlook, small craft advisories here in the north with 10-foot seas, southeast 40 south of the Forelands, 15-foot seas, really strong gales here for southern Cook Inlet into Kachemak Bay, even stronger, almost storm force, but not quite. South winds for the Barrens, southeast 45 for all of the North Gulf Coast, with these seas up to 28 to 29 feet. And Prince William Sound, southeast winds 45 knots, those seas building to 12 feet. Moving on to Kodiak Island, east winds 45 tomorrow on the east side, northeast under gale for Shelikof Strait. Sitkinak to Castle Cape, east 30, 15 knot winds to the Alaska Peninsula out of the northeast. Small craft advisories there for Bristol Bay. And for Monday, east winds at 25 for Bristol Bay, northwest 25 here, turning west 20 south of the Alaska Peninsula. They'll seas up to 12 feet though. And then south 35, Castle Cape up to Sitkinak, and full end gales there for the east side of Kodiak Island, 45 with seas building to 25 feet. And then for the eastern Aleutians, northeast winds 15 to 20 knots here, taking more of a turn to the east across the Nikolsky area, and then 25 to 30 as you head into the central Aleutians, edging up to gale force tomorrow, hanging on to the gales, minimum gales there for the western areas with seas 25 to 30 feet. And then for the outlook on Monday, more north-northeasterly and a little lighter coming down under gale force with those seas still high there, either side of 20 feet. North, 30 knots, stiff breeze there for the central Aleutians. Northwest, 25 to 30 for the Fox Islands, with all those seas running from 12 to 19 feet. And for the Bering Sea, here on the southwest coast, north winds 25 to 30 knots, 6 to 9 foot seas. Good gale there back into St. Lawrence Island with a high wind warning coming up. Northeast 35, northern Bering Sea, 25 knot winds for the Pribilofs. And then for Monday, north 30 south of Nunivak Island, and gales again all the way up to St. Lawrence Island, St. Matthew Island, and the Pribilofs increasing to 35 knots with 18-foot seas. Up along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast tomorrow, east and northeast winds, 20 knots there, dropping back to about 15 on the central coast, then edging up to 20, and then from Point Lay on down to Cape Thompson, 30 knot winds, gales from Cape Thompson down to the Bering Strait. And then on Monday, even stronger. Now we've got 40 knot northerlies here from the Bering Strait up to Cape Beaufort, turning northeast there, and northeast 30 on the west side. All iced in here, but these seas in the open areas up to 14 feet there, and then northeast, east-northeast, 30 knots for the central and eastern coast. For tonight again, front coming north currently pushes northward, weakens, but band of moisture will move into the southeast interior, eventually in toward the 40-mile country up toward Eagle, and then another trough will keep it wet and kind of breezy along the North Gulf Coast, drying out over the Panhandle. Out west, front holding and slowly weakening. As you can see, it doesn't make much progress, keeps it unsettled out in that area. Colder air coming southward across the eastern Bering Sea. A big storm lifting northward tomorrow afternoon takes a track to the northeast, bringing wind to storm watches through much of the interior. Colder air plunges southward out west.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.